Have you ever felt like you just weren't capable? That you weren't smart enough, strong enough, or just not the right person for what God was calling you to do? If so, you're not alone. But today, I want to remind you that God has placed no limitations on what He can do through us. So why should we? Let's dive into God's Word and discover why we should stop putting limits on ourselves and start walking in faith. The first thing we need to remember is that God designed each of us with a unique purpose. You were not created by accident or without intention. God placed you here at this time in history with a specific plan in mind. Jeremiah 1 verse 5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Think about that. Before you even took your first breath, God had a plan for you. The limitations we put on ourselves don't come from Him. They come from fear, doubt, and the enemy trying to keep us from stepping into our God-given purpose. But when we embrace who God created us to be, we can walk in confidence, knowing He has already equipped us for the journey ahead. Many times we put limits on ourselves because we look at our own strength. We think, I don't have what it takes, or I'm not talented enough, I'm too young or too old. But the truth is, we were never meant to rely on our own ability. We were created to depend on God's strength. Philippians chapter 4 verse 13 says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." The Bible doesn't say some things. It says all things. This means that no matter how impossible something may seem, if God has called us to it, He will give us the strength to do it. When we stop focusing on our own limitations and start focusing on God's unlimited power, we'll find that we are capable of far more than we ever imagined. Fear is one of the biggest limitations we place on ourselves. We think, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Fear makes us hesitate, keeps us stuck, and causes us to shrink back instead of stepping forward in faith. But God's Word tells us differently. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Fear does not come from God. If we let fear control us, we are allowing the enemy to keep us from the fullness of what God has for us. Instead, we must step out in faith, knowing that if God calls us, He will equip us. The next time fear whispers in your ear, remind yourself that God has given you power, love, and a sound mind. You don't have to live in fear. Sometimes we limit ourselves because we look at our own weaknesses. We think, I'm not strong enough, wise enough, or qualified enough. But here's the good news. God's power is made perfect in our weakness. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." God isn't asking us to be perfect. He's asking us to trust Him. Even when we feel weak, God is strong, and He will work through us if we are willing to step out in faith. Some of the greatest people in the Bible, Moses, Gideon, and Peter, felt unqualified, but God used them mightily. If we surrender our weaknesses to Him, He will turn them into strengths for His glory. So today I encourage you, stop placing limitations on yourself. Stop saying I can't when God says you can. The enemy wants you to believe you're too weak, too old, too inexperienced, or too broken. But God says you are chosen, equipped, and capable through me. God has created you with a purpose. He has good plans for you. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11 says, "I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." He has given you everything you need to fulfill that purpose and those plans. And most importantly, He is with you every step of the way. Take that leap of faith, trust in Him, and watch as He does exceedingly abundantly more than you could ever ask or imagine. Ephesians chapter 3 verse 20 says, "Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us." So don't limit yourself. Trust in the limitless power of God. If this message encouraged you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. May God bless you abundantly.